Hello everyone and welcome to another video. One of the core aspects of RollerCoaster Tycoon is designing and building your own rides, but that can be quite tricky and not everyone wants to put time into that. That is why the game provides you with quite a number of pre-built track designs. You can select any of these, plop it down and you'll have a nice working ride in your park. But how good are these pre-built designs really? Are they worth it, or are you better off building your own designs? And most important of all, which ones are the very best and which ones are just absolutely awful? This final question was posed by the top comment on my previous video and it inspired me to make this video, so thank you for the suggestion, Mika Brunette. The answer to the first question is rather easy. Pre-built designs are not as good as very optimized custom designs, but a lot of them are still quite decent and will serve you well enough. For example, this wooden coaster I designed has roughly double the maximum throughput, the same ticket price and about 2/3 the construction cost of woodchip, a popular and quite effective pre-built design. However, woodchip will still make you more than enough money in any regular scenario, and the same goes for most other pre-built designs. So yeah, while designing your own can be quite a bit more effective and in my opinion also a lot of fun, you don't need to do that in order to thrive in this game. Not all pre-builds are the same though, and there are a few you definitely should not use. But before we can answer the question of which are the best and the worst, we need to collect data. There are a total of 204 pre-built ride designs in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2, of which 173 are roller coasters. For each of these I wrote down the construction cost, size, running cost, excitement intensity and nausea ratings, maximum ticket price and maximum throughput. This isn't quite as simple as it may seem. For example, almost all ride designs come with some sort of scenery included, even if it's just a bit of path. You can disable this to save money, but that will also lower the excitement rating and thus maximum ticket price, and you'll now need to build your own queue line. In order to keep it simple, I built every pre-built with the scenery included. That does mean that the listed sizes may not be entirely accurate, as those only take the coaster and entrance and exit buildings itself into account. I could measure all the coasters with scenery and or path myself, but to save time and keep me sane, I wrote down whatever the game told me. There are other variables as well. The mini suspended coaster Fright Flight suffers from having a minimum waiting time of 10 seconds, which severely hampers the maximum throughput. I could manually disable this and make it better, but I feel like most players don't do that and just build the ride, connect it to the path, open it and never look at it again. Therefore, I didn't alter any settings after building the ride, except the ticket price. The two exceptions are the Colossus and Rolling Thunder twin tracks. These are clearly designed to go together with synchronized stations, as that's how they are in real life, so while all the other rides got tested in isolation, these two pairs got to go together. The maximum ticket price changes as rides get older, which also makes this a tricky thing. In order to avoid having to deal with this, I simply set this value to what it would be if the ride was between 5 and 12 months old and was the only one of its type in the park. I feel like this is reasonable, and while it may not give 100% accurate numbers if you're looking at a longer span of time, the relation between the pre-builds will be accurate enough. With that all done, let's get to the testing. A lot of data I could just look up and write down, but for some stuff I did need to actually build the ride and run it in order to get the value. First, I tested all the rides with empty trains and used the excitement, intensity and nausea stats that came from that. Then I let guests ride it to see what the throughput is. The number that the game gives you is not very precise and can vary a little bit, so instead of trying to get a value from that, I made my own. I let all the rides run for exactly one in-game year, then noted how many guests rode it in that year and converted this number to the guests per hour as it would be displayed on the ride window. To prevent any randomness and variability between tests, I disabled both breakdowns and rain, which does make the numbers a bit higher than is maybe realistic, but for the sake of comparison it is the best way to do it. The ticket price and profit are things I did not need to worry about. You can calculate the ticket price from the excitement, intensity and nausea ratings, and then you can combine that with the throughput and the running costs to calculate the profit per hour. In these tests I only included designs from RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 and not the first game. Some designs from RCT1 are also included in RCT2, but others are not or might not even work, so keeping it to just the RCT2 design saves us a lot of headaches. It was still a lot of work. I did this in batches of a few coasters at a time to keep it manageable, and about 8 hours later I had this massive spreadsheet of data for all 204 pre-built designs. I learned a lot, and here are a few fun facts about them. In total there are 12 names with a character in their name that is not a letter. These 7 have a dash, and the Rolling Thunder and Colossus pairs have parentheses and a number to distinguish the 2 tracks. But the coolest of all is the stand-up coaster Stampede, which has an exclamation point in its name. The longest name is Great American Scream Machine at a massive 29 characters, followed by 3 designs with 25 characters. The shortest is just 1 letter long, and that is X from Six Flags Magic Mountain. After that there's a big gap, and the second shortest are 4 rides with 5 letter names. These 3 designs look like they have nothing in common, but they do. You see, outside of 2 mazes and a Virginia reel for some reason, all pre-built designs come with a queue line and some exit path, but while all the other ones have those 2 connected, these do not. I discovered that this is a rare thing during testing, as I would build a few rides and connect whatever path was closest to the rest of the park. But with these 3 that wasn't enough, and the guests ended up either unable to reach the queue or stuck on the exit after riding. You can use on-ride photos to make a little bit of extra money, but the pre-builds don't make heavy use of this. Only 7 of the 204 have a photo section. Including this in this analysis is a bit tricky as well. If you only have 1 roller coaster in your park, then a lot of guests will buy that photo, but the guests can only hold 1 photo per category, so if you have 10 upright steel coasters and they all have a photo section, it will sell a lot less per coaster. I checked some rides with photo sections in various parks, and it seems that 10% of customers having bought a photo is a realistic number. The default profit per photo is €1.80, so I will add 10% of that to the maximum ticket price in order to take this into account. Since Twin Loop is in the different photo category of inverted coasters, which are less common, this one will get 20%. In terms of ride stats, there are 7 pre-built designs that have some sort of anomaly. The Hyper Twister Raven Racer and the swinging suspended coaster Regurgitator both have excessive lateral g-forces, which gets them a boost to their intensity and nausea ratings. Their intensity ratings are still below 10, so their excitement stays unpenalized, but Regurgitator now does have 10.33 nausea, the highest of any pre-built design. The highest intensity rating belongs to the aforementioned Twin Loop with 9.92, and Dragster takes the crown for the highest excitement rating with 8.99. The low end of the stats is a bit less interesting, as that's just a few gentle rides that naturally have low intensity and nausea ratings. The exception is the excitement rating, as the car rides, old timers and roadworks have extremely low excitement of just 0.4 and 0.38. This is because they get a stat penalty. Usually, car rides can easily get over 3 excitement, which is not too bad, but these both fail to make the length requirement of 200 meters, causing the excitement to be divided by 8. It is probable that both of these were tested with a minimum waiting time of 10 seconds enabled, as then the car gets stuck outside of the station for a bit while accumulating length, getting them over that threshold. But then they saved the designs without this enabled, so the cars don't get stuck and record a length that is too short. These are not the only pre-builds that fail stat requirements. Runaway Mine Train is another one, and this time it's the drop requirement of 6 meters. I know it's based on a real-life coaster from Six Flags Great Adventure, but the real one does have a drop of more than 10 meters, so they could have made it work. While these 3 do have a somewhat valid excuse, that isn't something that can be said for Cheesy Mice and Ice Flow. These pre-builds that were designed fully from scratch both fail the drop height requirements, which are 6 and 9 meters respectively. They both still look like fun rides to me, so from that point of view they're fine, but from a gameplay perspective there is really no excuse for failing these requirements. Alright, now that we're done with the fun trivia, let's take a look at which pre-built designs are good and which are bad. Firstly, we'll see which are the most profitable. A lot of pre-built roller coasters will have a maximum profit of between 15 and 35,000 euros per hour, but there are a few that go above that. Wings of Apollo, Frightmare, Pterodactyl and Verticulator can all make over 45,000 euros an hour, with Verticulator even hitting 50,000. They are at the very top with very high ticket prices and maximum throughput, but there are still 2 designs that beat them. The first is the wooden coaster Ugly Twisters, which is a Mobius coaster, allowing it to run 2 stations at the same time, increasing the maximum throughput to about 3,400 guests per hour. A Mobius coaster also combines stats like drops and airtime from both sides for the excitement, intensity and nausea stats, so those are very high too, resulting in a high ticket price. This all combined allows Ugly Twisters to have a profit of 55,500 euros an hour. Despite that, it is still completely destroyed by the other Mobius design, Raven Racer, the Hyper Twister coaster. With the 4 across cars, it has a very high capacity and can reach a throughput of over 4,200 guests an hour, and the extra intensity and nausea it gets from the excessive lateral G-forces actually help it too, as that increases the maximum ticket price a bit. This all results in a massive maximum profit of over 68,000 euros an hour, dominating every other pre-built design in the game. If you disable the ridiculous 33-second minimum waiting time after building it, it will be even better and reach a throughput of about 6,700 guests per hour, more than 50% extra, which allows it to make over 100,000 euros an hour. I cannot count these stats for the list, as then I'd have to optimize all the other pre-builds too, and frankly I have better things to do with my life. However, this does show that it is a good idea to see if the minimum waiting time is enabled when you put down a pre-build, and disable it if you can, as that will almost always increase the throughput. The least profitable pre-builds are just the ones that are bad ride types. The 3 mazes take the bottom 3 positions, followed by the 2 monorail cycles and the mini golf, all with less than 1,000 euros an hour. We have seen before that the maze can be really good, but only if it's tiny, which is something that these pre-builds are not. They also suffer very greatly from only allowing up to 4 guests in the maze at a time, giving them throughputs of less than 150 guests an hour. The least profitable roller coasters are all mini coasters, steeplechases and mini suspended coasters. These coaster types are just bad, with single car trains and low stats. While the mini suspended coaster is the worst coaster type, the top 3 spots are actually taken up by steeplechases, with each less than 3,000 euros an hour. This is because all of these are designed with few cars on a long block sectioned track, which means that frequently there will be no car waiting in the station to board guests. Profitability is not everything though. Verticulator may be the 3rd most profitable pre-built design, but it's also the 8th most expensive at 28,379 euros. This means that it will take nearly half a year to just pay itself back, and that's only if you manage to run it at full capacity the entire time and can afford to build it in the first place. The launched freefall Escape Hatch and the compact inverted coaster Polar Cap make much less money per hour, with just 19 and 22,000 respectively, but they are so cheap that they will have earned their construction cost back in less than a month and start putting you in the plus very quickly. However, with their fairly modest hourly profits, these will eventually be overtaken by other more expensive and more profitable designs. On the other hand, you can easily just build 5 Polar Caps for the same price as 1 bigger coaster and make more money anyway. But that doesn't work if you don't have a lot of guests in your parks, and the higher ticket price of the bigger coasters will make more money as the guests pay more per ride. On the yet another hand, 5 Polar Caps will attract more guests to the park, and the very short ride time allows guests to ride it more frequently than they could a big coaster, making the Polar Caps the better choice anyway. See the problem here? It's impossible to determine a best pre-built ride by just looking at a few numbers, as every situation is different. Sure, we can easily say that Ice Flow is bad and Great White Whale is great, but comparing 2 great but very different pre-builds is very hard. There's also the complication that some ride types are just better than others. Yes, the 12 least profitable roller coaster pre-builds are all steeplechases, mini suspended coasters and mini coasters, but that's for a big part the fault of the ride type itself, not the design of the pre-build. Escape Hatch is a super cheap pre-built design that will make you a lot of money if you build a bunch of them, but it's also just a tower with the launch speed set to 111 km per hour, there's hardly any design to it. Another factor is that most players actually do not optimize or even know how any of this works at all. If 2 designs have the same potential, but one is good to go out of the gate while another needs a lot of optimizing, like building a good path layout, increasing the ticket price a lot or whatever else, then the first design is better, as most people will not optimize the second design and does not achieve the same results with it. This is very hard to all take into account, and which designs are good and bad will depend partly on who is playing. But I have done my best and have made a list of the top 5 worst and best pre-built designs. I looked at which ones are particularly good or bad for the ride type that they are. Profitability is important, but it's not the be-all end-all, and we will not see any of those super unprofitable mazes in this list. I have also mainly looked at the ride's own profitability in a pay-per-ride scenario. A terrible maze will attract guests to the park that either pay for the entrance or may go on other more profitable rides, but taking that into account is pretty much impossible as it so heavily depends on what's in the rest of the park. With that all said and thought about, we'll start with the 5 worst designs and then do the 5 best ones. Firstly, I want to name the trio of Nitro, Titan and Goliath as honorable mentions. These 3 Hyper Twister coasters are the 3 most expensive pre-builds and also 3 of the 4 largest, with the other Goliath being in between them. Nitro is especially bad as with its 96 tile length it doesn't even fit in a lot of parks, making it entirely useless. However, these are all based on real life rides and are pretty accurate, so even though I did want to mention that these and some other real life designs are terrible for gameplay, I can't really say they're badly designed. In 5th place we have the previously mentioned Suspended Swinging Coaster Regurgitator. Suspended swinging coasters already have a super high nausea rating, but thanks to the penalty from the excessive lateral g-forces, this one has more than 10 nausea, while no other pre-built has more than 8. This means that it will be too nauseating for a ton of guests and will still make the other ones that do ride it throw up quite a bit. It's not super expensive at about 13,000 euros, but its 23,000 euros of hourly profit is decent at best, so even ignoring all the puke and sick guests, it's not great. And outside of that, designing a ride with excessive g-forces is just bad design. Well, not always, but when it's unintentional and severely hampers the ride, it certainly is bad design. There is a Virginia Reel Crazy Night that will get this too if you test it with guests, but most of the time people test with empty cars, so that one will usually be fine. On the Regurgitator there is no avoiding it though, making it very badly designed. Next up are 2 equally bad car rides, Roadworks and Oldtimers. These are the ones that get a stat penalty and as a result have less than half on excitement. Yes, you could prevent this by fiddling with the settings during testing, but realistically nobody is ever going to do that, mostly because they don't know about the existence of stat requirements in the first place. What makes these especially bad is the super low ticket price. These 2 have a maximum price of €2.40 compared to the next lowest of €3.40 for the mini maze. That doesn't seem that bad, but remember that for the ticket price we assumed the ride is between 5 and 12 months old. As soon as they turn 13 months old, the ticket prices fall by €2, making them just 40 cents compared to €1.40 for the mini maze. These 2 designs are just utterly incapable of making any decent profit in the long run, and you're likely to forget about changing the price because you don't expect it to go so low so quickly, resulting in people not going on it for a while because they're too expensive. The prices get so low that these 2 very quickly stop making any kind of profit at all. Roadworks already starts losing money after 13 months with a 40-cent ticket price. Oldtimers has a higher throughput and still makes a little bit of money now, but also stops making money at 5 years old when the ticket price drops to 20 cents. Another few years later the prices literally go to €0.00 and the guests do not want to pay anything at all. Even the increase for when they become monuments at 25 years old won't make them profitable again, as it still only goes to 20 cents. There is no other ride in the game that cannot make a profit at this very late stage. I do really like the scenery on Oldtimers though, very pretty. At number 3 we have Batty Bikers. We have talked about the 12 least profitable rollercoasters earlier, and Batty Bikers is by far the worst of those. Its profit of €1,600 per hour is 1,000 lower than To the Death, the second least profitable one. Batty Bikers is just terribly designed. It has quite a long ride time of 1 minute and 26 seconds, but it has only 5 cars. And because the first block section is so incredibly long, these cars have to wait at the top of the first lift hill for another roughly 25 seconds, not counted in the ride time, forcing the car in the station to wait as well. This means that on average about 2 cars per minute with just 2 guests each depart the station. Even another bad ride type like this Hardline coaster will easily beat this with roughly 6 cars per minute that carry 4 guests each. Batty Bikers is so bad that it will take more than 4.5 years to even just pay back its construction costs, by far the longest of any roller coaster. The ride that takes the longest to pay itself back is the Maze Crazy Castle. The car rides from the previous spot may never make a profit again after a certain point, but before that point they can pay themselves back and make you a couple of thousands of bucks if you take advantage of the high ticket prices for new rides. Crazy Castle has such a low throughput that it cannot do this, and it needs to go through many years of losing money before making a tiny bit of profit again when it becomes a monument at 25 years old. With such low profit, it takes over 100 years to fully pay itself back, and that's only if there's no other maze in the park, which would lower the ticket price. And then this maze will too never make a profit again and be the only ride to never pay itself back. Interestingly, how long it takes to pay itself back varies greatly. I had to re-record this part of the voiceover because it originally said 180 years instead of just over 100, as that is how long it took in an earlier test. I also recorded some footage where I put this maze called Crazy Castle in the Crazy Castle scenario, but guests kept getting stuck in a certain corner of path, slowing the very sped up game down, making it take even longer to record, and after nearly 500 years it still hadn't paid itself back. I can only imagine that these huge discrepancies have to do with different energy levels of the guests, as the slower they walk, the lower the throughput of the maze will be. Even though this maze is entirely unprofitable on any kind of realistic timescale, I did not put it in the list of worst rides, as decently sized mazes are just bad by default, so it's not the fault of the design, it's the fault of the ride type. In second place we have another duo, Slippery Seals and Seal Sliding. Both of these are ice-themed corkscrew coasters from the expansions, and they're both terrible. The corkscrew coaster in general is quite a good ride type, and the Cobra is a good, cheap and small moneymaker, but the same cannot be said for these two. They are absolutely massive, very expensive, and at the same time they're also the two least profitable corkscrew coaster pre-builds. The worst of the two is easily Slippery Seals, but I didn't want to let Seal Sliding go unmentioned, as it too is terrible. Slippery Seals has a construction cost of 28,845 euros, which is the 7th most expensive pre-built in the game. It is also absolutely massive, with 18 by 47 tiles, making it the largest pre-built in the game that isn't based on a real-life roller coaster. Thanks to its singular 5-car train, it has a throughput of just 720 guests per hour and a profit of only 10,200 euros an hour, which are the lowest of any pre-built design that has trains consisting of multiple cars. As a comparison, a very standard big coaster type pre-built like Bumblebee can make up to 25,000 an hour, 2.5 times more than Slippery Seals. It's also just a weird design, as while it is designed like a standard continuous circuit coaster with a chain lift, it is also launched, but at a low enough speed that you slow down to chain lift speed very quickly. Not only does this make no sense at all, it also gives it the highest running costs of all pre-built designs with 542.4 euros per hour. There is no redeeming factor to this design, not a single one. It's massive, it's expensive, it makes very little money, it's very weird, and you're better off building pretty much anything else. Well, except the design in spot number 1, but what could possibly be worse than this? I just told you that Slippery Seals is pretty much as bad as it gets, so how do we top this? In first place are Penguin Paradise and Bear Circle, another two ice-themed roller coasters. But what's wrong with them? Penguin Paradise seems like a fairly normal bobsled coaster, and Bear Circle should be quite good considering it's a cheap and small reverse incline ride. Well, just have a look at what happens. Yeah, they both crash if the guests on it are heavy enough. And this isn't some once-in-a-lifetime the stars align event. No, if you have enough guests for full train, then both rides always crash pretty much immediately. This unequivocally makes these two the worst pre-built designs in the game. There's just no going around it. If you do want to pick one of them to be the very worst, then it should be Penguin Paradise, as it's bigger and more expensive, meaning you wasted more money. Bear Circle does have double the capacity per train, so it will kill more people, but the lives of the guests in RollerCoaster Tycoon are not worth anything, so that doesn't matter. It speaks to how bad the Wacky Worlds expansion is, that the 4 worst pre-built designs in the game are all from Wacky Worlds, and curiously also all ice themed. It was Frontier who made these expansions instead of Chris Sawyer, and they really did not know what they were doing half the time. Although Chris isn't without blame either, as for example Batty Bikers, Regurgitator and the 5 designs with stat penalties all come from the base game. From the worst, we'll now work our way up to the very best. Some designs that aren't very good but not quite the worst are the very expensive ones, like Velociraptor, Blue Hurricane, Texas Giant and Lunar Launcher. They're quite well designed actually, but a coaster this expensive and big is just naturally a bad one for making money. They're still a good option for a moneyless scenario like Extreme Heights though, and if you're absolutely swimming in money and you don't need to optimize anymore, then they can be a pretty great addition to your park as well. There are also quite a few designs that may not seem bad from just looking at them, but are actually quite mediocre compared to other designs of the same type. Specifically, I mean the wooden coaster Shimmy, the Giga Coaster Ice Chaser, the vertical drop coaster Soul Stealer, the spiral coaster Siege Breaker and the corkscrew coaster Ionizer. What makes these bad is a low throughput caused by not having a lot of trains combined with a long ride duration. They will still make you money in the long run and definitely are not terrible, but compared to the other ones of the same type they're just not very good. In the middle there's a whole range of pre-built designs that are all just fine. Pre-builds like Ricochet, Mango Muncher, Hawk's Nest, Gold Rush, Multidiver, Helixius, Red Baron, Mymania, Neptune's Knot, Hedgehog, Texas Tubbs, Splash Mine, Updraft, Toxic Toboggan, Mini Diver and many more are all fine and nothing special in either the positive or negative direction. Sure, some are a bit more effective than others, but all of these will get you what you need. This is especially true if there is no cash machine available. Without it, guests only have so much money to spend, and almost any design will be able to extract that money pretty quickly. There are still differences of course, and the bad designs are still bad, but in pay-for-entry scenarios or pay-per-ride scenarios where there is no cash machine available, it's really just the best idea to build the cheapest designs possible, and other factors such as profitability matter a lot less, or in pay-for-entry scenarios matter not at all. It was actually quite hard to pick a definitive top 5 best pre-built designs, as while there are a few comically bad ones, there is far less room to be comically good. It's also really difficult to take into account how much the strength of the ride type itself contributes to how good the pre-built is. A terrible ride type could have a brilliant pre-built that is still a bad ride because the type itself is so bad, but it would be weird putting that in the list of best pre-builts because, well, it's still bad. Nevertheless, I did my best and here are my picks for the top 5 best pre-built designs in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2. Well, actually, first I want to mention 2 designs that are good enough for this list but are ineligible for one reason or another. The first is Polar Cap, a polar bear coaster. This is a very cheap and small reverse incline design that has a decent throughput, good ticket price and is generally just fantastic at making money if you build a bunch of these. The problem here is availability, since as far as I could find, the Polar Bear coaster is only available in one scenario, Ecological Salvage or Icy Adventures from the RCT2 Wacky Worlds expansion. This may surprise you, as in OpenRCT2, any variant of the compact inverted coaster allows you to build any of its pre-builds, so here it's available in a lot of places. But in Vanilla and Classic you only get the designs from the expansions if you have the corresponding vehicle type available. Being a good design doesn't matter much if you're pretty much never available, so even though it's amazing, I cannot put it in the list. The second design I cannot put in the list is Escape Hatch. Look, the launched freefall is incredibly strong and being able to charge rollercoaster level ticket prices on a tiny footprint with very low construction costs is overpowered. But as I said before, there is barely any design to this. You just set a launch speed and build a tower tall enough so it doesn't fly off the top. So while yeah, Escape Hatch is fantastic, you're still better off building your own identical one that has a more convenient path layout. Except in speedrunning, where using the pre-build saves enough time for it to easily be the better option, and Escape Hatch is amazing. Then we have now come to our actual top 5, with at number 5 Circulator, an inverted impulse coaster. Compared to the absolute titans, it's not that profitable with about 23,000 an hour, but it makes up for it with a very cheap construction cost and a tiny size. It pays itself back in less than 2 months, so it will start making you money really rather quickly. And while it looks rather intense, it only gets about 7.5 intensity, which is not that high. It is held back a little bit by a somewhat high nausea rating of 5.4, but that's not too bad either. The idea with small pre-builds like this is that while individually they lose against bigger ones, if you build a bunch of them together they will outperform one big coaster, despite still taking up less space and costing less money. Our next entry is Wings of Apollo, one of the 2 air-powered vertical coaster pre-builds. It has high stats all around, including nearly 9 intensity. This is partially a downside as it means fewer people will want to ride it, but it does also have its advantages. Firstly, it means it's perfect for scenarios where guests prefer more intense rides, and secondly, it increases the maximum ticket price, especially on the air-powered coaster, as this type has the highest intensity multiplier of all ride types in the game. This makes the maximum ride ticket price so incredibly high that it's one of the very few rides that have its profit underestimated in this spreadsheet. I took the maximum price of the second age stage, between 5 and 12 months old, but that is still €22 for Wings of Apollo, while you can only charge up to 20. In fact, in the next stage, between 13 and 40 months, it's still exactly the maximum of $20. The only other pre-built that is limited by this €20 limit in this spreadsheet is Dragster, the other air-powered vertical coaster. No other ride type goes above €17.4. These high ticket prices make Wings of Apollo one of the most profitable pre-builts in the game, ranging from somewhere in the top 10 all the way to a definitive second place as it gets older or when you have multiple in the park and it isn't hindered by the €20 limit anymore. It's also not too expensive to build at €8,700 and it's not too big either. The reason it's not higher is that while it's a little bit more involved than the launch freefall, it's still a very simple design and it's mostly good because the air-powered vertical coaster is just an overpowered coaster type. In third place we get Turbine, the looping coaster. Like some of the impractical massive designs, this is also based on a real life ride, but unlike those, this one is really good. With a long train and a short ride duration, it can reach an impressive throughput of about 2,850 guests an hour, significantly higher than the 2270 and 1760 of Wings of Apollo and Circulator. It is slightly larger and more expensive than Circulator and has a lower maximum ticket price, but the higher throughput means it's about 20% more profitable at roughly €28,000 an hour. Its lower intensity and nausea ratings means that outside of parks where guests prefer more intense rides, every guest will want to go on it if they're happy enough, which is a significant advantage over the previous two designs. There's also another factor that we already discussed earlier in the video that we do need to take into account here, and that is that a lot of people don't optimize, so they don't change the ticket prices for their rides, or maybe set them the same for all roller coasters, like €5 or something. If you charge the absolute maximum possible for Circulator and Turbine, then during the second age stage, Turbine makes 18.5% more money than Circulator. However, if you charge €5 for both, then suddenly Turbine is 67% more profitable. It's not about only what's theoretically possible, but also about how people actually play. This is way too variable to take into account for the entire spreadsheet, but for the absolute top we can and will look at it. Turbine is fantastic for just building a whole bunch of them, especially if you synchronize them by building them next to each other, but there are still better designs. Our runner-up is a crowd favorite, the wooden coaster Wood Chip. This is a very simple and compact wooden coaster and it's incredibly good. It costs only about €7,500 to build, has a decent maximum throughput of 1,750 guests an hour and a good maximum ticket price of €13.8. Out of all wooden coasters, it pays itself back the quickest, and thanks to its low construction costs, it will have the third highest profit of all wooden coaster rebuilds after the first year, only beaten by the significantly more expensive Great White Whale and Ugly Twisters. But you can simply build 2 wood chips to achieve the same as one of those bigger ones, or build 1 wood chip where you wouldn't even be able to fit or afford a bigger design in the first place. Of course, Turbine is a better pre-build than wood chip if you compare their numbers directly, but the wooden coaster does not have access to a launched mode, so that's not a fair comparison. For what the wooden coaster can do, wood chip is an absolutely phenomenal design and it's never a bad idea to build it when it's available, and it's available a lot. I don't have hard numbers on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if the wooden coaster turned out to be the most commonly available coaster type in the game, and if it isn't, it will definitely be near the top. One way that it is better than Turbine is that it's just over 600 meters long and has more than 6 excitement, meaning that in scenarios where harder guest generation is enabled, it will count towards the soft guest cap, while Turbine, Circulator and Wings of Apollo do not, and actually neither does number 1. So, which design do I hail as the best pre-built of RollerCoaster Tycoon 2? It's Raven Racer. I already mentioned this Hyper Twister coaster design earlier as being the most profitable design of all, but that's not all it's got going for it. It's not too big, with a footprint of 11 by 37 tiles, and its cost of just under €16,000 isn't that expensive for what it can do either. The reason it's so profitable is that it's a Mobius design with 2 synchronized stations. Not only does this allow 2 trains to board at the same time for an incredibly high throughput of up to 4,280 guests an hour, it also adds up the stats of both sections to calculate the excitement, intensity and nausea, while guests only have to ride one section at a time. This, combined with some cheeky excessive lateral g-forces that increase the intensity and nausea ratings even more, give it very high stats and thus a very high maximum ticket price. The previous 4 designs came in at 23, 24, 28 and 45,000 euros of profit per hour, but Raven Racers easily tops that with a massive 68,000 euros per hour. The excessive lateral g-forces do give it a fairly high intensity rating, but in practice there are still plenty of guests that are willing to ride it, especially as the park goes on for a bit, as older guests will have built up their intensity tolerances. There is another factor that makes Raven Racer great that I haven't really properly discussed yet, and that is a short ride duration. Woodchip, for example, has a ride time of 1 minute and 12 seconds, but Raven Racer does it in just 42 or 44 seconds. A shorter ride time means that guests get off it faster, allowing them to go on another ride sooner. This means that you need fewer guests to achieve the same number of guests per hour, as each individual guest can ride the ride more often in that hour. Of course, this is even more of an advantage for the 21 second long turbine and 13 second long wings of Apollo, but once again the Hyper Twister coaster does not have access to a launched mode, so a 43 second ride time is actually super short. Raven Racer is not fit for every park, but when you can build it, it will be an absolute beast that will never disappoint you. And yet, there is one more design that lurks in the shadows. I cannot quite include it in this list since it's not available in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 and doesn't even work in the vanilla games as the launched mode works differently now, but I also cannot ignore it. So, in 0th place, ahead of 1st place, is the incredibly popular, iconic and overpowered RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 pre-built design Shuttle Loop. This is basically Turbine but on steroids. It's less than half the size, less than a third of the cost, and it still has about 80% of the maximum profit. And importantly, since it has nearly the same maximum throughput, it will make pretty much the same amount of money for everyone that does not change the prices of their rides. With its size of just 26 tiles, the only smaller pre-builds are the lifts and launched freefall, meaning that you can really just put this anywhere. It also only costs 1,202 euros, less than every pre-built in the game except for 2 mazes. Thanks to its low intensity rating of 3.92, it's very accessible for every guest in the park, a little bit more than Turbine even. There really is no downside to building this, and it will make you a lot of money if you just plop down a bunch of these all around the park, like I used to do in Leafy Lake when I was little. Earlier I mentioned that I wasn't really going to take into account how many guests the rides attract to the park, as the effect of that depends too much on the other stuff you have built, but I can't entirely ignore that aspect here. Every ride type attracts a certain number of guests to the park, and for this it does not matter how big or small it is, with the exception of the few scenarios where harder guest generation is enabled. Since the shuttle loop is incredibly cheap and each looping coaster attracts 95 guests, spamming shuttle loops is the cheapest way to get a lot of guests to come to the park if you're just looking at the pre-builds. This is not only great in pay-per-ride scenarios as you now have more guests to go on the rides, but it's also great for pay-for-entry scenarios. Yes, in the latter you could build even smaller and cheaper rides, and spamming merry-go-rounds is technically a better deal for purely attracting guests, but we also need to keep in mind that most players don't actually know how these systems work. When I was young, I never spammed merry-go-rounds, but I certainly did spam shuttle loops. That is why I took into account that most people don't optimize ticket prices, and that's also why pre-built designs that are both easy and attractive to build while being incredibly good, like the shuttle loop, are a lot better than pre-builds that need a lot of complicated optimizing to reach potentially similar results. There is no better pre-built design than the shuttle loop. It's so efficient that it's not even much worse than the custom micro corkscrew design, and that is possibly the most efficient ride design in the entire game. And that was my analysis of the 204 pre-built designs in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 and also Shuttle Loop. To summarize, smaller designs are generally better, but really most designs that aren't too expensive, let's say under 12,000 euros, will be very effective in making enough money to sustain your parks. Bigger ones like the Great White Whale and Raven Razor can be very strong too, but require a bit more of an upfront investment, so you need to be a bit more careful when building these. Any massive design is a bad investment from a money-making perspective, but they can still look cool, so if you can afford it, go nuts. Lastly, if you, like me, are an enjoyer of death, then you should build Bear Circle and Penguin Paradise, as they will crash and kill your guests. I hope you enjoyed learning about these pre-builds and that you can use this knowledge in your own parks now. To learn how the maximum ticket price that you can charge for these pre-builds is calculated, click right here. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.